Hi, and welcome back to Family Foundations. Let's review a bit what we covered previously in Session 2. We looked at puberty and adolescent development. So as a reminder, in puberty, we looked at the fact that it begins in the brain. Long before anything is felt or seen in the body, the brain begins to change. And we can know that the time is coming when a whole lot of things will change for our children. And interestingly also, it begins at a different time for every person. Remember that this is a time when kids really want to fit in and be like everyone else, and they are not like everyone else. All of these changes are controlled by hormones that we can't see or anticipate their changes or know really what's coming. Different timing, a different progression, a different length of puberty is unique to every person. There really is no normal. We reviewed some of the everyone changes that both boys and girls go through in hopes that you would have easy, simple language to talk with them about this. And honestly, this needs to begin about the time their bodies hit that first growth spurt. And then you can prepare them for the other changes of skin, hair, and eyes, and their body changes that will happen in their reproductive systems as well. Again, in that incremental, sequential, and relational approach that we've been talking about. I highlighted to you as well in this last session this idea of leaning in parenting, compassionate parenting, that allows us to have a response to our young people that is welcoming and helpful and supportive, and lets them know we're going to be there for them through this hard time, lets them know we know it's a hard time, rather than layering on more stress and expectation to them. Your homework was to look at the 40 developmental assets. I hope you had a chance to take a look at that worksheet and maybe even ask your child or children to take a look at it as well and highlight and mark those that they feel they have and those that might be an opportunity to work on and look at developing. Again, those are protective factors that help young people grow up healthy, caring, and responsible. So we're ready to dive in with the next session.
Aloha, this is Dave. And you parents are my heroes. It's an honor to be with you. This session is titled The Body Speaks, and the whole series is focused on the optimal sexual health of your children. And this session, my job is to build a case that lifelong loving marriage is the optimal place for optimal sexual health for any sexual activity. So, couple quick warnings. One, since we're looking at optimal health, this may bring up some non-optimal sexual health issues for you, some trigger things maybe from the past, maybe some current non-optimal sexual stuff. And I just want to be sensitive to that, but I also want to say that if stuff comes to the surface, pay attention to it. I believe, even from my own experience, that when it comes up, it's there for us to grab a hold of that and process it and get healing for that so that we can be the best whole, healed parent for our children. And even our challenges, our regrets can become opportunities to teach our kids in the right direction. Second thing, I want to present this hopefully simplified so that you can use this with your children, either with me speaking and you pause and just talk through, or you master this and present it to your own children. So, the body speaks. Where are we headed? First, who is teaching your kids about sex? Second, the body speaks and it speaks truth about sex. Third, sex is like fire. Fourth, sexual fire is safest and healthiest within the fireplace of lifelong loving marriage. And fifth, my application is the modeling parent. So let's start with who or what is speaking to your kids about sex, because there's a lot of voices out there about sex. In fact, they're very loud. TV, Hollywood, music, advertising, social media, and the old smartphone, the school system, International Planned Parenthood, and pornography. All of these are giving messages about sex, and we should be aware of what those messages are, because if our kids have a cell phone or just going through life, they're going to be confronted with messages such like sex can be with anyone, anytime, anywhere. It doesn't even have to be anyone. It could be anyone's. Kids are taught that they are sexual from birth. And so the goal is to sexualize the kids, to normalize sex. And what would be healthy if kids are sexual from birth, what would be healthy from this perspective would be that kids get taught in sex from an early age, including practice. So I look at that and my eyes get really big because that is not what I want for my children. I want optimal sexual health. And so that's what I am going to give to you. But first, what are some other voices that are speaking to your kids? The first one I put is parents. Only you know that answer, and hopefully you're getting encouraged to get the courage up to keep this ongoing dialogue with your kids and learning the strategies. Second, if you're a person of faith, is your church equipping you, edifying you so that you can talk to your children. And if you're a person of faith, the scriptures have a lot to say about optimal sexual health. So, I want you to notice that those big 7 right on your screen, those are speaking very loud to your kids and very incessantly going after them, even without your kids looking for them. These will come after you with messages about sex. So let's look at the body speaks. What I'm going to present to you in 40 minutes is what I present to youth in about 3 hours. So we're going to go quickly, and I'm going to kind of dialogue as if I'm talking to my youth. So I start out with puberty. I ask the kids, what's the purpose of puberty? Well, it matures us, it grows us. Lori talked about this in last session. Little girls become ladies and little boys become men. And so we as parents can seize this maturation and encourage our kids to grow up in all of the areas of their life as they go through puberty. Second, hormones is what causes puberty to happen. Now you're going to notice that there's a mystery box on your screen. So it's going to seem like I'm going all over the place, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take pieces, like as a puzzle, and put them all together, and later I'm going to explain to you what the mystery box is. So it's going to seem disjointed, but it all ties together. So next, with the body speaks, we have 11 major body systems, and you, in your body, you have 10 and a half of them that are fully complete. So let's take a look at some of them. The cardiovascular system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, integumentary system, the endocrine system, digestive, excretory. And you'll look on the screen, you have 2 bodies, a male and a female, and you'll notice that the systems, 10 of the systems are all basically the same. But there's one that's not the same. But hold off on that. First, let's talk about the first 10. Those 10 systems, it's super important that they are fully complete and fully functional in a person, because it will affect the quality of a person's life and even can lead to death if a part is not functioning properly. So take, for example, if my skeletal system and my muscular system were gone, I would just sink to my chair as like a big bag of goo. So it is super important for my quality of life to have a fully functioning skeletal and muscular system. I could tell you lots of stories, but for the sake of time, you can think about other ways that having the 10 bodily systems fully functioning is super important for optimal health and life. Now it's interesting, the one that is very different between the male and the female is the reproductive system. And it's interesting, the reproductive system doesn't really care that much about you and keeping your life going. It cares about keeping the next generation going. I know people who have never engaged in sexual activity, and they lead a very fulfilled life, very enjoyable, great relationships. They have fun, they're experiencing the world. And so sex does not equal having a fulfilled life. But sex is highly important for keeping the next generation alive. So let's look at that reproductive system. How is the reproductive system completed? You need one male and one female. Take notice, 1 and 1. So let's look at that. I know Lori looked at the reproductive system, and she looked at it from more of a medical perspective. I want to look at it more from the body speaking perspective. And so this could be awkward, but my job is to take the word off of awkward so that you are left in awe and amazement about these amazing bodies that we have. So let's start with the male reproductive system. Same simple drawing that Lori used. And I want to ask you a question. What is the most important part of the male reproductive system? Pregnant pause on purpose. Because if you listen to the big 7, those other voices that are speaking to our kids and us about sex, well, they would all say that the penis is the most important. In fact, most of those big 7 view this as the male sexual system, not as the male reproductive system. But I would make a case that the testicle is the most important part of the male reproductive system. The testicle in an average healthy male will produce 1,500 sperm every second. Whoa, and what's the purpose of a sperm? Exactly, to fertilize an egg. And if the egg is fertilized, what does that bring? A baby. So we looked at just one part of the male reproductive system, and the testicle is speaking silently, screaming silently, baby, 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 life, life, life. And with 1,500 sperm being made every second, that's 150 million to 200 million sperm being produced every single day. So the testicle is serious about life. And the testicle is housed by the scrotum, that stretchy sac that will lower automatically. So on a hot day, when boys or men are playing sports outside, that scrotum will lower, but on a really cold night, the scrotum will get up close to the body. And males don't have to think, lower, raise. It's automatic. So our bodies are serious about life. And so why is the scrotum going up and down? It's because optimal temperature is needed for optimal sperm production. So after sperm get produced, they hang out in the epididymis because they're just a cell, but that's where they gain their tail so that they can actually swim. And with ejaculation, those sperm get pushed up the vas deferens and then come into contact with those white areas, the seminal vesicles. You hear the root word, semen. And so that's where the sperm get connected to a thick and sticky fluid called semen. And so why thick and sticky? What is that speaking? Well, think about it this way. If that deposit of fluid landing in the vaginal canal is very runny, it will just run out of her. But it's thick and sticky so that it will stay. And then the sperm know what to do. In fact, there's actually a pre-ejaculatory fluid that gets released first that neutralizes the vaginal canal and the pH system so that the vaginal canal doesn't attack the sperm. And then that pre-ejaculatory fluid will actually interact with other chemicals that will draw the sperm up. And so I look at this, every part of the male reproductive system, including the penis, which is basically the delivery system for the semen, it all is there and designed for the purpose of reproduction, for the purpose of babies, for the purpose of life. And it's amazing. So what is the reproductive system? The body speaking, life, life, life. Baby, baby, baby. And so now let's switch over to the female reproductive system. Let's start with the female equivalent to the male's testicles, and that is the female's ovaries. What's the purpose of an ovary? To produce eggs. And what's the purpose of an egg? To become fertilized. And what does that produce? Baby, baby, baby. Life, life, life. So the female system is exactly speaking the same thing as the male reproductive system. Life, life, life. And once that egg is conceived, it will go down the fallopian tube and then land in the uterus, which I believe is meant to be the safest place on earth. That a child, a special, unique child, can develop in this very safe place and go through all the cell reproduction and all the genetic and DNA coming together to form this unique child. And so I've said the word unique several times here. Well, let's just take how many sperm are in a teaspoon of semen. It's 150 million sperm. That's how many sperm are in the ejaculatory fluid semen entering the vaginal canal. So that's 150 million average sperm that are going for that one egg. So that one egg that fertilizes is a winner. There were 149,999,999 losers. But your child and you are the winner. And so I don't believe that was an accident. That was not a chance. That this was a purpose. Every child is a 1 in a 150 million purpose. And that uterus is that safe place for a child to grow up in and mature and develop. I want to quickly introduce from kind of an Uncle Dave perspective. I've been on the earth 50 years and I'm sensitive to a female's time of the month. And so this is just my quick take on it. Lori gave all the science last session. Go back and review that. The very bottom there talks about the build-up of blood and tissue on the uterine walls to create that safe landing for a baby to land. And so that uterine lining is super important, that it is fresh and has the nutrients from eating healthy. And so you can take care of yourself and your child by eating a good diet. But that tissue lining needs to be fresh. And so every month that will tear away and go out. But if the monthly cycle would not happen, that blood and tissue would stay in there and it would get stale after months, years. So the menstrual cycle really is a good, helpful, healthy, beautiful thing that also is speaking life, and it prepares the right landing for that child. So we can throw out, get rid of the terms like, hey, I'm on the rag, or hey, Auntie Flo came into town last night. because our, at least the female's menstrual cycle, can be a very good and healthy thing. So Uncle Dave's perspective after living on this earth for 50 years. If that's helpful, use it. If not, throw it out. So let's move on. So the reproductive system is the first that is speaking to us and pointing to lifelong, loving marriage. And since, this might bring a trigger point to you about marriage, because some marriages can be lifelong, but they're not loving. Other marriages might be loving, but they don't last and go the distance of lifelong. So I want to bring out what I would call the definition of a perfect marriage. The perfect marriage is two imperfect people who refuse to give up on one another. That means you're going through a lot of hard times, a lot of challenges, a lot of issues, a lot of refining of self, of the relationship, of communication, but the two are committed till death do us part, and they refuse to give up on one another. So let's use that as a working definition of marriage, and the reproductive system points us to, directs us to, speaks lifelong loving marriage, and since puberty matures the reproductive system, it's pointing to lifelong loving marriage, and hormones kick in puberty, so it's pointing to lifelong loving marriage. And now let's do some sexual math regarding the reproductive system. So, the male, what does it take again to complete the reproductive system? One male and one female. The male has half and the female has half. Half plus half equals 1, but the male and the female, when they come together and complete the reproductive system, two bodies physically are becoming one. So the two are becoming one. And so that points to lifelong loving marriage. And when the reproductive system comes together, it's usually a matter of time when both parties are healthy that a baby will result. So what's the best context for a baby? Is it a one-night stand, like a hookup? That's very popular in college campuses. If there's conception and that baby is born and never knows the father, is that the best optimal condition for a child to be raised in? And I ask that to the kids and they all say no. Well, then I ask the kids, how about friends with benefits? And they'll say no. Well, how about a teenage long-term dating relationship, 2 or 3 years? And they'll say no, because they know that isn't necessarily going to last. Well, how about two 20-somethings that are living together with cohabitation? Is that the best context for a baby? And the kids will say no. Well, how about lifelong loving marriage? And the kids will say yes. And the kids that I teach, they know that this is true, that the best context for lifelong loving marriage, they know this in their heads, but they also know this in their hearts, either by what they're experiencing or what they see their friends experiencing. So a little bit more on the baby. The baby is made up of 46 chromosomes, 23 from the father, 23 from the mother. And so how many of those chromosomes can the kids control? They're contributing 23, so they can control 23. If there's 23 that comes from another person, should a child just go on every whim and urge and be like a rabbit or a cat and just reproduce with whoever is walking and in front of them? Absolutely not, because the potential for that person's 23 chromosomes combining with your 23 chromosomes is going to be a new life. So we want to encourage our children to not be like cats and rabbits, but to be highly selective about who and when they choose to have sexual relations with that can lead to a baby. And if our children are selective about who they are going to be with, that means that our child can control all 46 chromosomes. And so this too, when they are selective about the one, they are pointing to lifelong loving marriage. And now sexual desire. And this is one that can and has been fumbled, I think, in the past, maybe by parents, by the church. But I don't think it needs to be fumbled. I think we can flat out ask our kids, is sexual desire good or bad? And inevitably, our child will say, well, it's bad and it's good. If sexual desire is out of control and it turns into lust, or that sexual desire causes us to be with a number of people, well, that's sexual desire that's out of control. But sexual desire that is controlled is actually a very good thing, because that desire is a desire to connect with one other person. And really our bodies and our minds, our brains, are wired to connect with others. You can look into emotional intelligence, brain research. We are wired to connect with people. And sexual desire is a desire that finds its fulfillment in one person as defined by the reproductive system. And that desire is there so that the reproductive system comes together and babies are produced. If there was no sexual desire, there would be no more babies and humanity would go extinct. So sexual desire is that desire to connect with one other person. And so our kids and we can be attracted to a number of people, but we have a will and we will choose one out of a number that we're attracted to, and then at the wedding night engage in sexual activity, and woohoo! It feels good. Dopamine is released in the brain, and we want to go back to that same person over and over. And when we do, hormones are released called bonding hormones in both the male and the female. I wonder what the purpose of a bonding hormone is. So in the male, vasopressin is released. In the female, oxytocin is released. And it bonds the two together, which is pointing to the lifelong aspect of marriage. And we'll notice more about our bodies speaking, that we have eyes, ears, and mouth. And those are all literally for communication. They are literally for speaking and hearing, communication, the relational part, the loving part of the lifelong loving marriage. And as a side note, one of the fun things that we do with the kids is we ask the kids to lock eyes with two separate people at one time. And it's so funny. They're like, they squint and they cross their eyes and so forth. They can't do it. We were made to lock eyes with just one person at a time. And so this, again, points to the relational and the loving aspect of lifelong loving marriage. And so the last one, in regards to the body speaks, is the hymen. And this I call the exclamation point, 2 exclamation points with a smiley face that just kind of encapsulates this whole thing. So what's the hymen? It's a thin tissue at the mouth of the vaginal canal, so only females have a hymen. And I have to preface this, that in today's world, with thin bicycle seats and monkey bars and tampons, it is possible for a woman's hymen to be cut or torn before first sexual intercourse. And that's okay. That's a part of the world that we live in. 200 years ago and before, the primary way that a hymen was cut was at the completion of the reproductive system. The male and the female coming together, and typically the hymen is cut and it bleeds only once, a little bit of blood, It's possible that it could bleed a little bit more, but typically just bleeds one time. And that's kind of interesting, that with the completion of the reproductive system, there's blood that happens one time, not over and over and over again, one time with the first person in sexual intercourse. And so I was curious about that. So I went to Google and I wanted to know what scientists thought of that. And the first two sites that I read said, science has no idea why the hymen bleeds. And so this came to me as I'm talking to the kids. Have you ever seen a Western movie where one guy takes his hand, pulls out his knife, and he cuts his hand? And then another guy takes his hand and his knife and cuts his hand, and the two go like this. And I asked the kids, what's that about? And I've had 10-year-olds say, it's a pact. It's an agreement. It's a commitment. It's a covenant. And the idea there with the blood pact or the blood covenant is that they would both mutually agree on something, and if one party would not fulfill their end of the bargain, whoosh, not just the hand, but the neck. And so it's interesting that written into the female's anatomy is this thin tissue that gets cut and it bleeds one time. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, that is an agreement. It's a pact. It's a covenant written into her body that once it's cut, it's the commitment and the pact for lifelong loving marriage. And that's why I call it a double exclamation point, smiley face. Because our bodies are serious about lifelong loving marriage as being the optimal place, context for sex. That is what's best for him. That's what's best for her. That's what's best for baby. That's what's best for the grandparents. And so right in front of you, enjoy it. And so now I'm going to shift gears, but I'm going to tie all this together. So the next section, we are looking at sex is like fire. And I'll ask the kids, how is sex like fire? Both sex and fire are beautiful. They're mesmerizing. They're good. They benefit society. And one of the messages I hope you hear all throughout these sessions is that sex is good and there is a best optimal location for it, just like fire. Because sex like fire can also be damaging. If fire gets out of control, it can burn us, and sex can too. And in the wrong context, it can be highly destructive and even kill. So if you have fire in a fireplace, in your home, that is a safe, protected place to enjoy a beautiful fire. And just enjoy it. Relax with it. So, do you see the fireplace? Now do you see the fireplace? So the question is, what are the bricks? What makes up these bricks? Well, first, let's look at a human being. Is a human only physical? Clear answer, no. We are body, soul, spirit, mind, emotions. We have a relational component. We're made up of genetics. We have a family. We have ethnicity, senses, a conscience. We are very complex, multi-dimensional people. And all of those are developing with your children, like Lori was saying in the last session. And so this leads to the question, if we are multifaceted, is sex only physical? Clear answer, absolutely not. Because what sex is one entire being of a person connecting sexually with another entire being of a person. So when the two come together with sexual activity, if you look on the upper right, certainly the two physical bodies are becoming one. But I like to say that that physical union, the two becoming one, is a visible symbol of all the other invisible unions that are coming together. And so there's all sorts of bonds and unions, a whole being coming together with a whole being. So there's a mental union brick that you see there, a spiritual union, emotional, relational, familial, financial, cultural, and there's a whole bunch more marital unions that come together with any sexual activity. I can think of a vocational union that happens. The couple doesn't have to be in the same vocation, but they can encourage and support one another. There's a missional union, a physical union, a social union, a psychological union. There's a whole, probably 10 more that we could list. But when you look at this and you look at the fire, isn't that a great place to enjoy sexual fire? Let's just enjoy it. Let's be mesmerized by it. That sex protected by the marital union bricks, and love and commitment being the mortar that holds that marriage relationship together, and exclusively monogamous, lifelong loving marriage, where a genuine yes to your spouse means a genuine no to billions of people. That's what that means. And so this is enjoyable. But what if finances are tough, or we upgrade the house and now all of a sudden between the two spouses we're working 3 jobs and we're so busy, and oh my goodness, our relationship is getting distant. What time we have at home we want to spend with the kids. Well, what happens to that primary relationship of the marriage? We're not spending enough time in communication together, and the relationship grows some distance. So what does that do to the sexual fire? It can also diminish that. Sex can decrease. Or possibly even worse, if there's conflict and even anger in the relationship, and one person gets hurt and wants to hurt back and it hurts the other, and that relational conflict affects the emotional union too, and now there's conflict and fighting, and then they're just distancing each other because every time they're getting together they're fighting. Well, what does that do with the sexual fire? If this goes on for a long time, then all of a sudden there's this little temptation that's like holding shiny things in front of us. Well, maybe I should look elsewhere. The grass is greener on the other side. And if one of the two lets that sexual fire out of the marriage, lifelong, loving fireplace, that fire is going to burn people. It's going to burn the one that's cheating. It's going to burn the one cheating on. It's going to burn the kids if there's kids in the relationship. And it's going to burn the one who's being cheated with. So this is where sexual fire can be destructive and very painful and burn people that are involved. So that's sexual fire getting out of control within the marriage unions. But what if the sexual fire gets activated outside of marriage? It never even gets into the marriage, like youth coming together sexually. So on the left side of the screen, that's 2 youth that are getting together sexually, and you can see that there's a spiritual union formed and an emotional union that's being formed with that sexual activity, and those are meant to be good. But those good things can end up burning the kids, because if they engage in sexual activity and there's a relationship for a while, well, everything seems good, but if the relationship ends, then all of a sudden the breaking apart of those unions, it's a tearing And it's a tearing at the heart and the mind and the whole being. And so what was meant to bond two people together actually ends up tearing them apart and burning and hurting them. Well, what about the right side of the screen? Well, that's two young people that are coming together sexually, and well, this time there was a conception, and now there's a baby. And so now the couple is looking at, oh, how are we going to take care of this baby? And how are we going to handle this financially? And oh my goodness, I got to go to work, you got to go to work. And now who's going to take care of the baby? So now the families are involved. And so there's a financial union that's coming together and a family union that's coming together, but not in the right context with all of the other unions. And so what was meant to be good ends up burning a whole lot of people, including the family. So, whether we're talking about sex getting outside of the marriage fireplace or sex never getting into the fire, either way will burn all the individuals involved. So let's take a look at some sexual risks of sex not in the right context. Lifelong loving marriage. And you talk about this with your child. You brainstorm with your child, what are some consequences that could happen? Well, here are some that I put down. STDs, broken heart, having a me or a selfish focus, having a taking mindset, becoming fractured in our mind, our heart, our personality, being isolated, having an unplanned baby. That's scary. Could lead to death, whether suicide from depression, or it could lead to death from an STD, or if abortion is brought in. Death is real. It's a real consequence with sex outside of lifelong loving marriage. The relationship could have drama and suspicion and a broken relationship or no relationship at all. Take a look at the rest of those on there, but I do want to highlight a couple of others. Notice inequality. Inequality between male and female. That can easily happen when sex is outside of marriage. And women bear the brunt of the consequences more than men do, both with STDs, because the reproductive system is inside her body and a fluid deposit is left inside her body, but also she's the one that's going to be carrying the child. And so this just brings out the man in me. We need to raise up men who will be there for their woman. I also want you to notice that poverty, far more likely to happen statistically with sex outside of marriage. And with all of this brokenness, what does it do to society? What does it do to a society's healthcare system, the mental health care system? If more kids are experiencing depression or anxiety or emotional pain or damage from sex outside of marriage, that could tax the system. How about the healthcare system with STDs? So tax dollars are going to flood into keeping the healthcare system strong so that people are cared for. But if those tax dollars are pouring into the healthcare, what does that mean for infrastructure? What does that mean for our roads? So ultimately, the choices that are made inside of a private bedroom are going to impact all of society. And you'll also notice there generational brokenness. If the brokenness gets passed on from one generation to another and another, in my line of my dad, there's 4 generations of divorce. And ultimately, all of this will lead to a weak, impoverished nation. So, enough on the junk. How about some of the good stuff? Let's put the sex back into the beauty of lifelong loving marriage. And now let's talk about some of the positives, some of the rewards and benefits that happen. So optimal health, having a whole heart, a we focus, a giving and receiving, unity. Having a baby doesn't have to freak us out because we got the context. We got dad and mom there together, husband and wife. This leads to life safety, trust, deeper relationship, joy and peace in the home and in the relationship. Treating one another with dignity, value, and respect. Having freedom, order, a solid marriage, family, equality between the sexes, prosperity. Follow the success sequence, and I should probably bring that up in another session later on. Wealth, generational stability, generational blessing, leading to a strong, vibrant, healthy nation that actually has enough resources to take care of their own, but also help other nations on earth. So what happens in the bedroom matters greatly. And so we as parents can empower our children to choose what's best. In Hawaii, we say the mo beta, more, better. Look at your screen. Isn't it obvious which one is the mo beta? Show this to your children. Talk this through with your children so that they can see what is oh so clear right in front of them. So where do we go from here? So first, parents, I want to encourage you to be a modeling parent. Go back to the fireplace. Are you modeling the right side of the screen? Are you modeling keeping all sexual activity within lifelong loving marriage? Kids are going to learn from us, both what comes out of our mouth and they're going to learn from what comes out of our life. And so we want to align ourselves, our own sexual choices for optimal health so that our kids can see that. So that's what I mean by live the message. It's both caught and taught. But I also want to say, let's show ourselves grace as parents, as adults. Let's have some redemption for our regrets. Maybe on the left side of your screen with all the risks, maybe we've gotten burned by some of those. Well, we do not need to stay shackled to our past. Let's get healing for ourselves. Let's give ourselves grace. Let's forgive ourselves so that we can keep the past in the past and get healing for that so that we now have freedom to use our past to share our story positively to others, including possibly our children. You don't have to go into all the minute details, but we can say, I want you, son or daughter, to have better than what I had. And I made choices that I regret. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is I don't want you to get hurt in the same ways that I got hurt. So let's have a redemption of our regrets. And that is so positive and brings so much freedom and healing to us. And it also brings a lot of healing to others. As we share our story, it gives permission for others to share their story, and a whole lot of people get set free. We can actually impact our nation by sharing our story. Last one, strengthen the marriage unions. So look at those bricks of the lifelong loving marriage fireplace and identify, and this is actually your homework. I want you to strengthen your primary relationship with your spouse. And I'm just going to take a note here that some of you may be a single parent, divorced. It doesn't matter. What I want you to see in this homework assignment is that your child has a father or a mother that's not you. And so that child is a product of your 23 chromosomes and their 23 chromosomes. So whether we're talking a marriage relationship or a single parenting situation, whoever the other parent is of your child, if the 23 chromosomes are like this, it's going to impact the kids. If the 23 chromosomes here of the dad and the 23 chromosomes of the mom are more loving, showing dignity, showing respect, even if there was a divorce situation, even if it was painful, to the best of our degree, and I know that some situations are more painful than others. I want to be sensitive to that. But for the best that we can, to have a a relationship that has harmony and love and respect, the 23 chromosomes will affect the positive well-being of our children. And so look at this homework assignment, whether you're married or single. Strengthen your primary relationship with your spouse. Do an inventory on each of the marital relational unions that are the bricks in the fireplace. Identify one growth area that you want to strengthen. Create a plan with your spouse to grow. How can we do a step-by-step and improve this? And then also, what will the metrics be? What will the indicators be that you've achieved your plan? So that's your homework assignment. Have fun with it. After you've mastered one union, go for another union. And don't even wait to master them. Keep growing in all of the areas. And what you're going to find is as you work on that one growth area, your others are going to grow also. And that's a blessing. It'll actually be a blessing for your own sex life. Woohoo! $1 million advice. So, last, contact Peace Education Services. It's been a blessing to be with you, an honor and a joy. I hope you can find this a real blessing as you talk story with your kids. Aloha.